Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And let me start by saying how happy I am to be once again part of this event. The ADC has been supporting the work of women at competition for several years now, and this initiative shows that despite the circumstances, the platform is very active. And of course, it gives me a special pleasure to greet Kanye Fernandez together with my fellow panelists, as Kanye was also one of the godmothers of this project, Women at Competition Iberia. And I have no doubts that the excellent cooperation between the ADC and the CNMC will continue, and that building on the legacy of Chairman José María Marín, CNMC's work will strive under her leadership. So I wish you, Kanye, and your fantastic team the best of luck and success in this endeavor. You know you can count on your friends on this side of the border in these challenging times. These are unprecedented times because we have borders now, and the crisis is bringing countless challenges to our societies and to competition agencies around the globe. The crisis has unique features for its speed, severity, cross-sectoral and worldwide nature. I think it's too early to draw big lessons, as the main challenges are yet to come. So I simply propose to share with you our experience over the past 3 months by providing examples of the measures we've been taking, both in the field of competition advocacy and enforcement, in order to try to infer some trends on what has been our approach so far. On March 16, already during the confinement period and a few days before the state of emergency was declared in Portugal, we issued a policy statement indicating that in the period of great collective effort that the country was going through, the ADC remained particularly vigilant in the detection of anti-competitive behavior that exploits the current situation to the detriment of the people and the economy, as that will tend to worsen the economic consequences of the pandemic. This was obviously meant to create incentives for goods and services to remain available at competitive prices. And we also acknowledged that the context might trigger the need for temporary business cooperation in order to prevent scarcity, for example, in the supply of essential goods, or to address other market failures. So the ADC has made itself available to provide individual guidance to companies. Actually, this was a very natural process, since these requests for informal guidance and approval started reaching the ADC and other competition agencies in the EU, which led us to consider that it was fair and appropriate to provide guidance. And actually, a week later, on March 23, a joint statement to the same effect was issued by the ECN, which the ADC also endorsed and published. Now, let me give you a few examples on what we've been doing on a more operational level. In the banking and financial sector, we issued written guidance to the Portuguese banking and consumer credit associations related to the adoption by these associations of the main conditions of private moratoria to be applied by their members, banks and other credit institutions on loan operations. That is, a suspension of debt payments in the context of the crisis. I have to say this was not exactly a comfort letter. In some aspects, it was perhaps a discomfort letter, but the truth is that we decided not to open an investigation on this matter. This type of joint action had been encouraged by the European Banking Authority and by the Portuguese Central Bank in order to allow banks to help the economy, families and businesses without disregarding their prudential duties. In any case, we warned about the risks of exchanging confidential information and about the importance of ensuring that banks remain free to grant their clients more favorable conditions than the ones set under these moratoria. In the pharma sector, the ADC issued guidance addressed to the Pharmacies National Association because following the sudden price increase of surgical masks, alcohol gel, certain medicines and medical devices, I suppose this happened a bit throughout the world, the association had recommended that pharmacists should comply with a specific maximum resale margin for these products. Well, under normal circumstances, a recommendation of this sort from a sector association even if apparently benign, may actually serve as a focal point and therefore lead to a price alignment in the market, besides discouraging innovation. We had many previous investigations and fines imposed on trade and professional associations for the exact same reason. However, we decided not to pursue an investigation here, since in the meantime, the government also approved legislation precisely on this matter, establishing, though on a temporary basis, maximum retail margins for these products. It is also worth mentioning that during this period, we closed the gun jumping case for failure to notify a merger in the hospital sector, which was settled with the acquirer. We accepted to receive, in this case, the fine in installments due to the potential liquidity constraints relating to the pandemic argued by the notifying party. In the football sector, however, our approach was different. We opened an investigation against a decision by Portugal's Football League involving the clubs of the first and second leagues, whereby they agreed not to hire football players who terminated their contracts for reasons related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we also imposed interim measures, ordering the immediate suspension of the agreed decision. Our preliminary view, because the main investigation is still ongoing, is that this decision constitutes a clear no-poach horizontal agreement, thus leading to a reduction of workers' bargaining power and wage level, besides depriving them of labor mobility. This type of agreement can also harm competition between rival clubs in the hiring of inputs that are relevant for the quality and competitiveness of their team, therefore also having the potential of depriving consumers of sports events of greater quality. The football sector actually continued to provide reasons for intervention. Just last week, we issued a recommendation, this time targeting the Portuguese Football Federation regarding a project of a regulation that had been subject to consultation, establishing rules on the functioning of the Feminine Football League, which included a wage fixing provision, a cap on the wages to be paid to female football athletes, supposedly to attract new entries by clubs in this league in the context of the pandemic. Of course, this project gave rise to a major social outcry for obvious discrimination reasons, and we also added the competition angle, which was actually gender neutral, warning the Federation about the anti-competitive nature of this project and of the serious antitrust liability that it might incur if the regulation or other equivalent provisions were ever approved. So I suppose we added another nail to the coffin, and the provision of this regulation will never see the light of day. Now, what trends or key takeaways may be drawn from this recent experience? Well, from the outset, we have strived to avoid the narrative that competition rules might somehow be suspended during the pandemic. Quite the contrary, competition rules remain fully in force. Although it is difficult to draw lessons from the past, if there is anything we can learn from the 2008 financial crisis, is that under enforcement is counterproductive. As Kanye has highlighted, competition enforcement plays a key role as a driver for economic recovery, so that in the aftermath of the pandemic, conditions are created to swiftly emerge from this crisis with dynamic and competitive economies. That being said, competition law is and has always been flexible enough to accommodate, when appropriate, different types of business cooperation on a case-by-case basis. We have indeed showed this nuanced approach towards certain collaborations. We have increasingly used our priority setting prerogative, which has led us in certain cases not to pursue investigations, particularly in the case of temporary and necessary measures to face market failures or shortages of supply prompted by the pandemic, either because those measures would fulfill the requirements of a positive economic balance, generating efficiencies that would outweigh the restrictive effect, or because they were not deemed to be anti-competitive in the first place. But we have also shown that we do not tolerate opportunistic behavior by companies that, under the pretext of the pandemic, seek to exploit the current situation. And indeed, we have opened several investigations in this context and despite this context, and we issued recently several statements of objections on the investigations we have in our pipeline, and there are several more to come. There is a certain policy shift in this exceptional scenario, which is noteworthy. I think it's our willingness to provide individual guidance to companies. It is true, I think, that we've always been approachable to a certain extent and never refused to hear companies' concerns, but we had been very reluctant so far to provide written assurances, therefore relying more on the existing system of self-assessment. We adjusted, therefore, our policy due to the need to provide some degree of legal certainty to the market, so as not to discourage firms from engaging in cooperation that might be welfare enhancing, for fear of being investigated by the ADC. This might cause an adverse chilling effect, so we decided to provide specific guidance. I suppose that this approach is also in line with the Commission's temporary framework notice, which came later, a notice for assessing antitrust issues related to business cooperation in response to the situation stemming from the COVID-19 outbreak. I think my 10 minutes are up, so I'll stop here. Thank you, Rita.